Welcome to How to Survive the Apocalypse. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and in today's episode, we face a world where the surface has turned hostile to human life. The air above is poisoned, sunlight is a threat, and every breath beyond your shelter could be your last. In this unforgiving reality, the only hope is to go below, deep into the earth, where darkness is safety, and survival means learning to live in a hidden world far from the sky. It began without warning. One morning, the sky was pale and wrong, as if the light itself had soured. A chemical haze rolled across the horizon, carried by winds that no one could see but everyone could feel. The air had weight now, pressing against lungs, stinging eyes, and leaving a metallic taste on the tongue. Reports came in waves, each more desperate than the last. Entire regions were choking under an airborne toxin released after a chain of industrial accidents and military strikes. Whether it was intentional or a tragic cascade of failures, no one could say. What mattered was the fact that the surface was no longer safe. By nightfall, government broadcasts urged people to remain indoors, seal windows and prepare to evacuate if instructed. But the instructions were already too late for many. Those who stepped outside without protection collapsed in minutes, their breathing ragged and wet. Hospitals overflowed within hours, and emergency responders began falling alongside victims they tried to save. The chain of command fractured almost instantly. For those who had prepared, basements became makeshift bunkers, garages turned into airlock entry points, and storm shelters filled beyond capacity. But these were stopgaps. The toxins were not fading. Air filtration systems designed for dust and pollen clogged in hours. Power grids in major cities failed as workers abandoned their posts or could no longer breathe the air to maintain critical systems. Without electricity, air circulation slowed, and even the safest sealed homes began to feel like coffins. In the rural stretches, some fled to caves and abandoned mines, desperate for natural protection from the poisoned atmosphere. Others tried to dig hurried shelters in their backyards, clawing at the earth with tools meant for gardening, not survival. A few lucky ones had already invested in underground living spaces, root cellars, converted fallout shelters, or military-grade bunkers. For them, the decision was simple: seal the hatch and wait. On the surface, silence began to settle, broken only by the distant groan of collapsing structures and the occasional scream that never carried for long. Streets once filled with the hum of life now held only drifting debris and the faint shimmer of airborne particles catching the dull light. The world above had shifted from home to hazard, and anyone still moving in the open knew each breath could be their last. Below the ground, survival was no longer about avoiding danger. It was about outlasting it. The first full day beneath the surface was a study in confusion and adaptation. For most, there had been no plan beyond getting underground and shutting the door. The initial hours were spent in a frantic inventory of whatever supplies had been dragged in during the rush: canned goods, bottled water, flashlights, blankets, batteries, and whatever else could be carried. The air was stale, but still breathable. The temperature dropped steadily, the chill of the earth seeping in from the walls. Communication with the outside world was sporadic and unreliable. Battery-powered radios crackled with fragmented transmissions from emergency services, then went silent without warning. Some messages claimed the toxin was spreading globally. Others reported isolated safe zones, though none gave coordinates. The lack of clarity only deepened the fear. By hour 12, food and water suddenly seemed scarce, even if the numbers suggested there was enough for several days. Every gulp from a bottle felt heavier, with the knowledge that replenishment might never come. Some, in larger underground spaces, began rationing immediately, assigning strict portions and enforcing them with the kind of tension usually reserved for prisons. Others tried to keep spirits up, insisting that rescue was coming soon, though their voices wavered with doubt. On the surface, the poison worked its way deeper into cities and countryside alike. Unsealed buildings took on the smell of rot and burned metal. The wind drove contaminants into cracks and vents, settling a fine dust on anything exposed. Animals that had not fled or been taken underground either died quickly or roamed erratically, their behavior altered by the air. By the end of the first 24 hours, psychological strain was setting in. The absence of sunlight confused the body's natural rhythms. People felt tired yet restless, hungry yet sickened by the thought of wasting food. Conversations repeated in circles, focusing on rumours of what had caused the disaster, who was to blame, and whether it could have been prevented. In the quiet moments, the distant thud of something heavy falling above could be heard through the earth, a reminder that the world was changing without them. In those early hours, the choice to remain below was not a commitment to a way of life. It was a temporary measure, an act of waiting. But deep down, there was a growing awareness that the surface might not be safe again for a very long time, if ever. Survival in an underground world begins with the most basic of needs. Air, water, food, shelter and light are no longer conveniences, but the pillars upon which existence rests. The first priority is air. In a sealed environment, oxygen will diminish faster than most realize, especially in confined spaces with multiple people. Without a functioning filtration or ventilation system, even the deepest shelter becomes a death trap. Hand-cranked air pumps, activated charcoal filters, and improvised intake systems built through layers of earth and stone are lifelines. Every cubic meter of breathable air must be protected like treasure. Water is next. Underground, the sources are limited. Stored water will run out quickly unless strict rationing is enforced from the start. Small teams in some shelters begin exploring nearby subterranean streams or tapping into groundwater, but these must be tested and filtered. Contamination from the poisoned surface can seep downward, making untreated water as deadly as the air above. Filtration units, purification tablets, or even boiling, if fuel can be spared, become non-negotiable survival tools. Food storage is a matter of both quantity and preservation. Canned goods and sealed rations hold best, but they are finite. Root vegetables can last in the cool underground air, but fresh produce is rare unless a shelter has space for hydroponics or sprouting systems. In long-term scenarios, learning to grow food in artificial light becomes the difference between life and slow starvation. Compact grow lights powered by batteries or improvised generators can produce leafy greens and herbs, providing not just calories but vital nutrients missing from packaged goods. Lighting itself is both a necessity and a luxury. Without it, morale collapses quickly and daily tasks become hazardous. LED lights are the most efficient, using little power, but candles or oil lamps may be all some have. Every light source burns fuel, so every second of brightness must be measured against the need to conserve. Shelter in the underground world is more than walls and a roof. It is insulation from cold, reinforcement against cave-ins, and an organized space that avoids chaos. Sleeping areas must be clean and separated from waste. Waste disposal, though often ignored in early planning, becomes critical to prevent disease. Buckets, composting setups, or improvised pit systems keep living quarters sanitary. Lastly, there is protection. Even underground, dangers remain: intruders, structural collapse, fire, or gas buildup. Simple alarms, reinforced doors, and constant awareness of the environment are the silent guardians that keep survivors alive when the surface can no longer protect them. The absence of sunlight does not erase the danger from other people. In the first week underground, the human threat becomes as real as the poisoned air above. When resources are scarce and escape routes are few, desperation drives people to acts they might never have imagined in ordinary life. In cramped shelters, arguments flare into physical confrontations over food portions, sleeping space, or control of supplies. Trust erodes quickly when survival is measured in dwindling cans and litters. In larger underground complexes, factions often form. One group may decide that strict hierarchy is necessary, appointing leaders who enforce rationing with force if needed. Another group might reject authority, insisting on equal say for every person. When these philosophies clash, the result can be sabotage, theft, or even expulsion from the shelter, a death sentence in the toxic world above. Some shelters are breached not from within, but by outsiders. As the surface grows more hostile, those without secure underground refuge begin searching for any sign of shelter. A locked door or sealed hatch becomes a beacon for the desperate. In rural areas, improvised tunnels and basements can be forced open by those determined to survive at any cost. The invaders might plead for entry, or they might bypass negotiation entirely, arriving with weapons in hand. Weapons themselves take on a grim significance underground. Firearms are dangerous in confined spaces where ricochets and overpenetration can harm unintended targets. Blunt weapons, blades, and improvised defences become more practical for close-quarters encounters. In some communities, these weapons are displayed openly as a deterrent. In others, they are kept hidden, revealed only when trust has already been broken. Even without outright violence, manipulation and deception are constant risks. A single false report about air quality or water contamination can cause panic, splitting a group or driving people into fatal decisions. Rumours about safe exits or government rescue can draw survivors to the surface long before it is safe, leaving them as silent statistics in the disaster. The greatest human threat underground is not always the stranger at the hatch. Sometimes it is the person you have known for years, the friend, neighbour, or even family member whose fear outweighs loyalty. In the dark and isolated world below, morality bends until survival is the only compass, and every alliance is one broken promise away from collapse. The choice of whether to remain hidden underground or risk movement becomes a turning point for many. Life below the surface offers protection from the poisoned air, but it is also a prison. Every trip to gather supplies, search for equipment, or scout new shelter carries the possibility of not returning. Some decide to stay sealed in, relying on what they have, stretching every resource to its breaking point. Others argue that without replenishment, the shelter will eventually fail, and waiting will only make them weaker when the time comes to act. For those who choose to move, preparation is everything. Venturing outside requires protective gear, capable of filtering or supplying clean air, full-face masks with replaceable filters, makeshift respirators layered with damp cloth, or in rare cases, self-contained breathing units scavenged from industrial sites. Skin must be covered to prevent exposure to airborne toxins that cling to clothing and seep into pores. Movement is calculated around wind direction, weather, and daylight, each variable carrying its own dangers. Some groups adopt a hybrid strategy, maintaining a secure underground base but sending small teams topside on carefully timed excursions. These teams gather food from abandoned stores, salvage tools and materials, or locate other potential shelter sites. Every return is a tense process of decontamination, removing outer layers, scrubbing exposed surfaces, and filtering air before rejoining the main group. For those who refuse to leave, the focus turns to fortification. Walls are reinforced, air systems are checked daily, and waste disposal is managed with meticulous care to prevent disease. Small-scale farming in sealed grow rooms becomes a priority, as does developing alternative energy sources such as hand-cranked generators or biogas systems fueled by organic waste. The question of urban versus rural survival is not simple. Urban underground spaces may offer access to more salvage and potential shelter locations, but they also attract more competition and greater human threat. Rural areas often mean fewer people, but also fewer resources and greater distances between safe zones. Both choices carry risks that cannot be eliminated, only managed. Whether the decision is to remain in place or move strategically, every choice is made with the knowledge that there is no safe option, only paths with different kinds of danger. In the poisoned world above and the fragile refuge below, survival is a constant negotiation between risk and necessity. Time in the underground world begins to lose meaning. Without natural light, days and nights blur into a single, continuous stretch of dim illumination and muted activity. By the 30th day, those who have endured begin to settle into a rhythm that feels less like living and more like maintaining existence. Sleep schedules drift, conversations shorten, a kind of quiet fatigue settles over the shelter like dust. Food supplies, by this point, have shifted from varied to monotonous. Meals become repetitive combinations of whatever lasts the longest. Rice, beans, canned vegetables, powdered milk. Fresh flavors are almost forgotten, and the body adjusts reluctantly to the absence of texture and variety. Water use is strictly regulated, with each person allotted just enough for drinking and minimal hygiene. Showers, if they exist at all, are rare luxuries reserved for special occasions or medical necessity. In some shelters, resourceful survivors begin establishing small-scale production. Hydroponic trays line the walls of storage rooms, sprouting greens under low-power grow lights. Mushrooms, which thrive in dark and damp environments, become a reliable crop. Seed exchanges between groups, if contact is possible, can expand the menu, but every new plant requires precious space, water, and energy. By the 60th day, makeshift communities start to form distinct roles. Some maintain filtration systems, others tend to food production, while a few handle security and watch for signs of intrusion. Leadership, whether formal or informal, emerges through necessity. Decisions about ration adjustments, supply expeditions, or structural repairs are made by those with the trust or control of the majority. The outside world remains a mystery. Occasional radio scans pick up faint transmissions, often broken or indecipherable. Some speak of regions where the air has cleared. Others tell of zones where the contamination has worsened, where nothing remains alive above ground. Without confirmation, these remain just fragments of truth, tempting but dangerous to believe. By the 90th day, the physical toll is matched by the psychological. Skin grows pale from lack of sunlight, muscles weaken without regular movement, and eyes adjust to the dimness in ways that make sudden brightness painful. More troubling is the mental erosion, dreams filled with open skies that may never be seen again, and the unshakable awareness that the underground might not just be a refuge, but the final home. History holds fragments of what life underground can mean, and those fragments offer both warnings and lessons. In 1941, as London endured the relentless bombing of the Blitz, thousands of civilians sheltered in the city's subway tunnels. They slept on platforms, cooked in the dim light, and adapted to a new kind of existence beneath the streets. The conditions were crowded, the air stale, and disease an ever-present risk, but it proved that human life could persist when the surface became uninhabitable. Decades later, during the Cold War, entire underground complexes were built in anticipation of nuclear war. The United States constructed facilities like the Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado, designed to survive a direct strike and continue operating for months without resupply. The Soviet Union created vast networks of bunkers beneath Moscow, some of which remain sealed to this day. These were not simply shelters, they were engineered ecosystems, with air filtration, water treatment, and redundant power systems. Their existence proved that survival underground was not only possible, but could be sustained with the right planning and resources. Chernobyl's nuclear disaster in 1986 offered another grim lesson. While the immediate danger came from radiation rather than toxins in the air, the evacuation of Pripyat forced thousands to abandon their homes and in some cases seek safety in underground structures. The radiation seeped into soil and water, contaminating everything it touched. In the years that followed, scientists working in the exclusion zone learned the importance of controlling what comes into a sealed habitat, whether it is air, water, or food. Even modern events provide parallels. During the global pandemic of 2020, some individuals retreated to pre-existing bunkers, limiting all outside contact for months. They faced challenges with mental health, resource management, and communication. Challenges strikingly similar to those faced in an apocalyptic underground scenario. These historical and scientific examples reveal a constant truth. The underground environment magnifies both strengths and weaknesses. A well-designed shelter with proper systems can sustain life for extended periods, but neglect in any critical area, air, water, food, security, can lead to collapse. Survival is not only about having a place to hide, it is about maintaining a living system that can endure isolation, scarcity, and the constant pressure of an uninhabitable world above. Projecting into the future, it is not difficult to imagine a world where underground living is no longer a temporary refuge, but the standard for human survival. Entire cities could be constructed beneath the earth, designed from the start to shield their populations from toxic air, extreme weather, or unfiltered radiation. These subterranean societies might have sprawling residential chambers, artificial parks lit by simulated sunlight, and vast agricultural zones fed by hydroponic and aeroponic systems. Power could be drawn from geothermal sources deep below, eliminating dependence on surface grids entirely. Over time, the people born into such environments would adapt in ways both subtle and profound. Without direct sunlight, skin tones might grow paler over generations. Eyes could become more sensitive to low light, enhancing vision underground, but making daylight almost unbearable. Social structures might evolve around the control of essential systems, water management, air circulation, food production, granting immense influence to those who maintain them. Trade and travel between underground settlements would be conducted through reinforced tunnels or pressurized rail systems, each stop a carefully guarded checkpoint against contamination. Currency might lose meaning, replaced by barter in essential goods or specialized skills. The value of a single seedling, a replacement filter, or a liter of clean water could outweigh any precious metal. In such a society, culture itself would change. Art might reflect the enclosed world, with music adapted to carry in narrow spaces and visual design shaped by walls and ceilings instead of open horizons. Children could grow up hearing stories of the surface as myth rather than memory, their concept of sky something imagined rather than experienced. Technology would become both lifeline and potential threat. Automated maintenance drones could keep systems running, but a single malfunction or cyber attack could jeopardize an entire city. Some might push for more self-sufficiency, while others would advocate for centralized control, believing it more secure. In the most extreme projections, surface exploration might become a dangerous profession, carried out only by trained runners in full protective gear. Their purpose would be to monitor the poisoned world above, searching for signs of change, whether it is recovery, further decline, or the emergence of new, unforeseen threats. In this future, humanity would not simply endure underground. It would redefine what it means to live there, creating a civilization with no need to look up. Survival beneath the surface strips life down to its most unshakable truths. Comfort is replaced by necessity. Privacy gives way to community, or at times conflict. Every action is weighed against the resources it consumes, and every decision carries the weight of potential finality. The underground world demands discipline, adaptability, and a willingness to live within limits that the surface once allowed us to ignore. Over time, the mind begins to shift. What was once a temporary refuge becomes the only known reality. The sound of filtered air moving through ducts becomes as familiar as wind once was. The dim glow of artificial light replaces the rhythm of dawn and dusk. Survival stops feeling like an interruption to life and instead becomes the framework upon which life is built. Yet even here, there is resilience. People find ways to create routines, share stories, raise children, and plan for futures they may never see. Bonds formed in these conditions can be stronger than those made in peace and plenty. The shared struggle, the mutual dependence, and the daily cooperation carve a kind of strength that the surface world rarely demanded. But there is also a cost. Time underground reshapes identity. The sky becomes a memory instead of a constant presence. Grass, rain, and sunlight fade into the same category as old photographs, things that can be described but not truly experienced. The connection to the planet's surface, with all its chaos and beauty, becomes something abstract. For those who survive, the question shifts from how do we endure until it is safe to return, to will we ever return at all? In the end, living underground is not just a matter of sealing a hatch and waiting out the danger. It is a commitment to a new way of being, one that demands as much from the spirit as it does from the body. It forces us to confront the fragility of the systems we depend on, and to recognize that survival is never guaranteed, even in the safest of shelters. Thanks for listening. This has been How to Survive the Apocalypse. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show and unlock bonus content, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.